All right, everybody, welcome back to the Realty Rundown with the Nic Wyse Team. I'm Nic Wyse, and with me, as always, is Nathan Schwartz.
That's right.
Today, we are going to be diving into one of the more exciting, I think, and also definitely one of the most stressful situations that you can get into in real estate: multiple offers.
Yep. Yeah. So that's right, Nick. Whether you're whether you're a seller trying to choose the best offer or a buyer trying to stand out from the crowd, understanding how to navigate multiple offer situations is key in today's competitive market.
That's right, man. So we're going to break it down into two parts because there's two sides to this, right? So we're going to talk about seller strategies, how you can come out to the multiple offer situation as a seller. And then Nathan's going to take the reins and talk to you guys about, as a buyer side, what you should be doing if you're a buyer and you're faced with a multiple offer situation. So let's go ahead and break it down and get started. What are multiple offers and why do they happen? So why they happen is typically in an inventory low market like we've had for years now, when we don't have enough homes on the market, but demand remains high. It's common for sellers to receive more than one offer on their home. This is called the multiple offer situation, and we issue what's called a multiple offer notice. It's actually a one-page form. It just goes out to all the interested parties and says, hey, we've got an offer. We have a second offer now, and we would like your highest and best offer by this date, this time, and please give us until this time to respond. So we can gather them all in, gather all those offers, and then break them down and help the seller pick which one is the best.
Yep. And for buyers, this means competition. So homes can go under contract within days, sometimes within hours, which I've seen that certainly. And offers need to be strong, strategic, and well-informed.
Yeah. And for sellers, multiple offers feels like you're hitting the jackpot, right? But it's not always about choosing the highest price. There's a lot of things to consider. So there's price in the terms, but the higher price isn't always the one that wins. So contingencies come into play, and they become very important, paramount, really. So we're talking about like inspection contingencies, financing contingencies. What is your down payment? What is your proposed closing date? Those are all the different things that kind of go into an offer that can really be a difference maker, for a seller, from a seller standpoint. Is the buyer pre-approved? Obviously, that's super important. And
Yep.
Not only are they pre-approved, but what kind of loan are they using? You've got your conventional loans, you've obviously got your cash buyers, then you've got your FHA and your VA, or in the Middlebury and some surrounding areas, you've got USDA loans as well, which are your zero down U.S. Department of Agricultural backed loans. So financing is super important. Escalation clauses. Something that we didn't see at all, honestly, until about 5 years ago when we started to get a really hot market. Escalation clauses basically says we are willing to beat any other offer up until this amount. We're not going over this amount. So it kind of auto bids for you. It's like a proxy bidding thing. Very important to understand exactly how they work. And from a seller standpoint, this is something a lot of agents don't know. I've had to argue about this with other agents when we've kind of interacted on these. As a listing agent, primarily, when someone sends in an escalation clause, you do not have to show them any evidence of another offer. They're basically, you're showing your hand, as a buyer, you're saying like, hey, we'll go up to this to beat any other offer. But as a seller, all you can do, you can look at that and be like, well, let's just counter them back there. We know they said they'll pay this. Let's just make the counter offer there. You do not. There is no legal recourse that says you have to show them what the other offer is. Now, when you use an escalation clause as a seller, you actually have to make a counter offer back because they're sending you the purchase agreement. It states whatever price, usually asking price that they're willing to pay. And then the escalation clause is just that. It's a side. It's not an agreement, actually. It's a side form. So then as a seller, you're like, okay, they said they'll pay up to whatever. We're going to counter them back at that amount. But the buyer can call your bluff too. They don't have to accept your counteroffer either. Just because they sent that escalation clause doesn't mean that they have to sign the counteroffer. So there's a lot that goes into it at that point. Another reason to have a good agent, have a good team on your side to make sure you're not getting yourself in trouble and that you understand what you're doing. Also want to talk a little bit about net proceeds versus offer price. So there's, of course, the purchase price itself, but then there's a lot of other things that can come up in that. Like if the buyer's having inspections, you can expect your proceeds to be diminished a little bit because there's probably going to be some repairs that you need. Is the buyer going over asking price, but maybe they're asking for seller's assistance as well? That's a line item on there. That's going to reduce your proceeds as well. So there's more than just the price to consider. At the end of the day, though, as we've talked about in past episodes, the one thing that doesn't change no matter what is the code of ethics. Choosing fairly and ethically. When you've got a bunch of offers out there, and maybe there's some names that seem a little different. They're not Mike White or whatever on there. And you see that. We just want to make sure that you kind of cast that to the side. In fact, I never am like, oh, well, here's the offer from this person, and this is their name. I'm like, these are the offers. And typically, front page, when I present this to my sellers, that front page is just a net sheet. And on that net sheet, it'll have some additional information on there about like the contingencies. Like this one's waiving inspections. So really, when I'm presenting this to the seller, and I feel like most agents do this as well, we're just looking at the nuts and bolts. They probably don't even know the name of the buyer. If you're doing it, who cares? Right. So I think that's just a cool thing that agents, hopefully everybody does. I know that's something I've always been pretty conscious of. One other thing I wanted to mention now, you know what? I'm going to touch on this later. We're going to skip this ahead. I've been talking for too long. Nate, tell us a little bit about some of the strategies that you use for buyers.
Yeah. So for buyers to make, here's how you can have your offer stand out in a multiple offer situation. So you kind of mentioned this, but get pre-approved, not just pre-qualified. So a strong offer starts with solid financing. A pre-approval letter from a local lender can go a long way. I even tell my clients that I'm not going to send in an offer if you don't have your proof of funds, whether that's paying cash or your financing. We need to give the seller some sort of reassurance that you can actually make this purchase. But having that pre-approval letter is, it's very important when you're sending in your offer. You're letting the other party know that I'm serious. I've gone through this. I'm so serious that I've gone through the steps with this lender, and I'm pre-approved for this amount to make this purchase. Make a clean offer. So minimize the contingencies. So if possible, shorten timelines for inspections or financing. We've even seen some people where they just waive inspections, where they just don't want to. They're like, solid house, like we've seen it, we're good. We're just going to move forward. We're going to try to beat out the other party. But yeah, so just minimizing your contingencies, trying to make it more attractive for the sellers is really what your goal should be. So consider an escalation clause, kind of what Nick went over as well. So if it's allowed in your market, an escalation clause tells the seller you're willing to outbid the highest offer up to a certain limit, which I've used those plenty of times, and they definitely come in handy. So another part too, offer a larger earnest money deposit. Some sellers don't care, but I think a lot of people are like, well, you're basically your earnest money deposit, you're putting some skin in the game. You're saying, I'm willing to give you X amount of dollars up front because I'm this interested in buying your house. So if you can put in a larger earnest money deposit, I think it does help. It shows the other party that you're actually really interested, and it gives them a little bit of an idea of your financial situation as well. I think it lets them know that you're pretty motivated buyer, and you've got the means to do so.
Nate, I'm going to jump in real quick because that Todd Stock, our broker owner for Remax Results, talks about that all the time, and he has given specific instances where like, hey, these offers are the same. This one's putting $10,000 down. This one's putting $2,000. If that's the break, if literally the offers are the same, if you used an escalation clause and it's a little bit of a price difference at the end, that earnest money can be the biggest difference there is. And as a buyer, you're still protected, right? Like if they, if you do have contingencies in place and they don't go through, you're going to get your earnest money back. So don't be afraid to put a large amount into escrow.
Exactly. That also, like, I think some buyers have a misconception that money is just gone. Like the earnest money is just gone. It doesn't go to the sellers. It sits in a safe escrow account somewhere, whether it's with the listing broker, the buyer broker, or the title company. That money is still there. It gets applied towards your balance due at closing. It doesn't get sent to the sellers or the other party. Like, it's safe. It's okay. You're going to get it back. It's going to be okay. That's a good place to start. Also, include a personal letter? No, I don't think so. So that's one thing too, is we call them love letters. But we've seen buyers in the past, they'll write a letter to the seller saying, they might include some personal items in there. And we simply, I made a decision. I'm not going to share those with sellers. It could be, I think, some more liability as far as discrimination. So we're just not going to put ourselves or you in a position of liability to possibly discriminate against someone else. But you can. I've had people say, we'd like to write a love letter, and I tell them, you can write it, but I'm not going to send it for you. And
that's right.
That you can write it up, but I'm not going to send it. I'm not going to put us at risk.
The danger, of course, is, like you said, you put something in there. Some people put a photo in there, like, look at our beautiful family, and then if there's multiple offers and they pick one that is not a protected class, and it was an offer from someone who's in a protected class. Now you've got potential for a lawsuit. And as agents, we're going to avoid that situation because we can be liable too if we pass that letter on.
Right. And it doesn't matter if that wasn't your intention. No. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. So that's also why we just don't want to get involved. We're not going to do it. But yeah, so yeah, quick little tip. I mean, focus on what you can control. So preparation, flexibility, and professionalism. Even if you don't win one offer, even if you don't win the offer, you'll be stronger for the next one, which certainly is true. It can take the wind out of your sails to lose out on multiple offers, but it prepares you better for the next one to come. So
Yep. And we saw a lot of people who, in the markets in 2021, 2022, they just stopped trying. At some point, I know people that were, they wrote 6, 7, 8, 9 offers and they're like, we give up. Well, as we've said before, it might have been an issue, not with your price. Maybe you were asking or offering over asking price, but you weren't using the other things that you can use. As I know, Nate, we've talked about it before. That purchase agreement is 9 pages, and it's 9 pages of opportunity. The price is 1 line.
Yeah.
There's 9 pages of things that you can make your offer stand out with. And that's something that, obviously we can help you with. Nate's been doing it. He's had a really good track record of getting offers for his buyers when there's multiple offers without people having to go crazy, and offer those 20, 30, 40,000 over asking price. We don't want you to do that either. We don't want you immediately underwater, on a home just because you liked it so much, you're willing to throw crazy money at it. We're going to try and work other ways around it.
Yeah, real quick, Nick. Another thing too is sometimes it's not just, and maybe you mentioned it earlier, sometimes it's not always about the money for the seller. I mean, as an agent, if your agent isn't doing this, you should ask them to. Like, it's okay. Your agent should be calling ahead of time. If you're going to go look at a house, agent should be calling the other agent ahead of time, trying to find out as much information as possible that they can pass along to you, because that can help with negotiations. Maybe they're willing to take a little bit less in price if it means you give them 4 or 5 days post closing possession, so they have time to get out of the house. So that's a big deal too. Knowing some motive, knowing the seller's motive with a couple things, that helps you with your offer as well. So
Yep. We have fiduciary obligations to our buyers and our sellers. So when it comes to confidential information, there's only so much that we can share.
Right.
But if we're able to find out information about the other party, we can share all of that with our clients.
Yep.
It's one of the reasons that when we built this team, we split it. So I'm always only representing the seller, and you're always only representing the buyer. 95% of the time. Of course, Nate does list some as well. He's got some investors he works with, and and I occasionally do some commercial buying. So there's a little gray line there, but generally speaking, when we're doing a residential transaction, we've got that degree of separation, and it works so well. It allows us to basically facilitate the transaction fairly and have honest negotiations without violating that confidentiality that we have for our clients.
Yep. Absolutely.
So Nate, I wanted to jump into a couple of real life scenarios. Do you remember me telling you about a house? It was before we were a team, but it had 19 offers on it.
Yeah, I remember that. Yep.
So, and honestly, the winning offer was not the highest. There was somebody who was like 20,000 higher. They were higher than everybody else, but they had 0 down payment. They were using one of those USDA loans. So the seller's looking at that, they're like, okay, if we get a cut appraisal, which we've talked about on past episodes, what that appraisal can look like when it gets cut. The higher that the buyer's willing to go, that doesn't mean the bank is just like, oh, great, well, we'll loan you any amount of money. There's a maximum that they're going to loan, and that's the appraised value. So in that situation, the USDA buyers, they were trying to do everything they could, but it wasn't the highest offer. It was the strongest overall. They waived inspections. They had great financing. They did an appraisal gap as well. So that's an offer that buyers say, hey, I'm going to offer you $250 on this $230,000 home. And if that appraisal is cut, I'm going to make sure, I'm going to tell you right here in writing, I'm going to cover the first $10,000 of cut value in cash myself. I have the resources to do that. Here's a proof of funds that I have those resources set to the side that I can do that. That's huge. That sets your buyer's mind or your seller's mind at ease. So that's one of those situations where I actually had to make like a color coded chart for the seller to like send it in. I spent so much time on this. Like it was like a pie graph on the side. Like here's all the cash offers, the VA, the FHA, like here they all are, the FHA are all in red, of course. Sorry, FHA and VA offers, but you were in red. And at the end of the day, so I send that in to my client, and they're like, "Which one do you think's the best?" I'm like, "You got to look at this. I spent all this time. You have to at least look at this thing."
Right.
Oh man, but
I put it up for you. Like I color coordinated everything. Like I put so much time into this.
I'm not techie. This was not easy for me. And this was before ChatGPT could just make its chart for me. So
Yeah, right.
but yeah, that's just one example that I had from a seller side where we had a lot of offers, and what made that final offer stand out was the unique aspects of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a couple last year. This would be on the buying side. But the first time home buyers, and they certainly lost out on a couple of houses due to multiple offers. We were actually under contract on another property, and it ended up, it fell through during the inspections. I mean, the place needed a whole new septic system. The sellers weren't willing to do it. So we're like, they're like, we're not going to move forward. And I'm like, well, man, I don't blame you. Let's move on.
Yeah.
But then we found another house for them, and there were multiple offers. I think it was either 5 or 7 of them, and we ended up beating them out. But they were able to use those last couple of times, losing out on the other couple of offers and then getting under contract and still losing the house. It sharpened them. They knew what to expect going into it. And it definitely gave them a dose of reality of like, this is where we're at with this house. We want it. And this is what we're willing to do for it.
Yeah.
But it can be discouraging for buyers, but take it as a learning lesson and just use it to sharpen you for the next one to come. So
that's right. Yep. Well said. I think that covers what we wanted to hammer through. So just to recap, if you're a seller and you're fielding multiple offers, or if you're a buyer and you're trying to break through and make your offer stand out, knowledge is power. Knowledge is key. Being prepared, that's key. Having the information that you need to make your offer stand out to that seller, that individual seller.
Absolutely. And if you want to be ready for your real estate move on either side of the table, reach out to the Nic Wyse team. We'll help you navigate the market with confidence and clarity.
That's right. We've done it before, folks.
That's right.
We're there for you. We've seen a lot of things.
Yep.
I guess that's why they say Nic knows.
It's
on a huge billboard. If you don't believe me, believe the billboard. So.
I see it every morning. I'm like, that's the boss man right there.
Nate wakes up. He's like, Nic knows. We're going to be all right.
That's right.
Oh, my gosh. Well, everybody, thank you for tuning in. That is it for this episode of the Realty Rundown with the Nic Wyse team. Thank you for joining us on this episode, Mastering Multiple Offers. And remember, Nic knows. Get wise replies. And we'll see you next time.